One morning I woke up and I couldn't feel my hand. It had happened to me a lot before, but this time it felt different. It felt like my hand had died. My arm was okay, but then after my wrist I couldn't feel anything. Just air. I moved my fingers but felt nothing. They were like ghost fingers. I started shaking it, but I couldn't wake it up. I was still half asleep, so I whacked it against the wall without really thinking. Suddenly, I heard my dad's voice and he was angry. He worked night shifts, so he'd probably just gone to bed. But I didn't care. I was starting to freak out. It hadn't lasted this long before. I ran to the bathroom and put my hand underwater. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even believe the temperature of the water. I touched it with my other hand and realized the water was burning hot. Of course, it had to happen to my right hand, the hand I use for everything. I wanted to Google what was going on, but I couldn't even type with my left hand, and I ended up dropping my phone. The screen shattered, and when I tried to pick it up, some of the glass got stuck in my hand. Great. So my right hand was dead, and my left hand was now bleeding. I called out for my mom, but she was already standing in the doorway. "What's with all the noise?" she said to me in an angry tone. "Mom, I can't feel my hand. It's completely dead," I whimpered, and then I started crying. She just laughed at me and said to give it a good shake and it'd be okay. Then she went back to bed and told me to stop acting like a baby. I couldn't believe it. I cursed myself for always sleeping on my right side. I'd been so tired the night before that I just passed out. I must have slept on my arm for more than 8 hours. What if I'd done some serious damage? The worst part was that we had a big exam at school that day, and I had a date with my boyfriend after school. How would I write the exam? How would he hold my hand if I couldn't even feel it? It'd be like I was holding hands with air. I grabbed onto the sink, and even as I saw my fingers grip onto it, I felt nothing. Trying to make breakfast was a complete disaster. I spilled the milk everywhere, and eventually I sat there and used my teeth to open the bread. And then I ate a slice like an animal, using my teeth to rip it apart. My left hand with the cuts on it was starting to hurt now, and it was weird, but the pain felt good. At least pain meant my hand was alive, unlike my other hand, which was just hanging there like a dead thing. Imagine not having hands. How did people survive? I shivered at the thought of it. When I got to school that day, I noticed my right hand was burnt. I hadn't even noticed it until then. Well, at least it didn't hurt. My boyfriend gave me a weird look when he saw me and pointed to my zip. I looked down and gasped. I'd forgotten to zip it up, but I couldn't do it. He started laughing and asked if I needed some help. At the exact moment that he reached out to zip it up for me, our math teacher passed by and gave us detention for inappropriate behavior. I couldn't believe it, and now we had to go sit for our exam. I told my boyfriend about my dead hand, and he said if I wrapped it up and compressed it, it might get better. I used my scarf and it honestly looked ridiculous. It was exam time. I spoke to the teacher in charge and explained what had happened, and he said it was the worst excuse he'd ever heard. I unwrapped my scarf and tried to pick up the pencil, but it was impossible. So I just sat there. Halfway through the exam, I started to panic. What if it never went back to normal? I couldn't sit there any longer. I got up, and as I pushed the desk away from me, it fell. I didn't realize how much pressure I'd put on it. It fell onto the girl sitting in front of me, and she screamed. I was mortified. I ran out of there without looking back. I ran all the way down the corridor, and when I got outside, I suddenly came up with an idea. Maybe if I hurt it, I'd be able to feel it. Like when you don't know if you're still dreaming and you pinch yourself. If it hurts, it means you're awake and it's real life. I looked around and saw some big rocks by the school car park. I picked one up and dropped it onto my hand. I'm not joking. I felt nothing. This was serious now. I needed to take drastic measures. I don't know why I didn't just go see the school nurse. But no, I decided to take matters into my own hands, quite literally. Our school is near a busy road. I made my way over to the bus stop, and then the stupidest idea ever came to me. The next time a bus pulled up, I'd crouch down by the wheel and let it roll over my hand. I mean, that wouldn't hurt that much, right? So just as bus pulled up, I pretended to drop my purse and let them get on the bus first. The driver hadn't noticed me, and suddenly I heard the engine starting up and then crunch. I didn't feel anything, but the bus rolled right over my hand and I managed to pull it out just in time before the back wheels went over it a second time. And then I passed out. I woke up in an ambulance being rushed to the hospital. The wheel had completely broken every bone in my hand and even crushed the nerves. I looked down at it and almost vomited. There was blood everywhere. And then I heard the panic in the paramedics' voices. We're going to need to amputate this one. There's proper nerve damage, and if it travels up her arm, she'll lose her whole limb. What? I started thrashing about on the stretcher. They couldn't take my hand. My life would be over. I kept going in and out of consciousness on the way to the hospital, and when we finally arrived, my mom and dad were there. My mom was hysterically crying and blaming herself for not listening to me. How did I explain that I'd done this to myself? That I deliberately let a bus run over my hand? The doctors had to hold me down. I kept screaming that I didn't want to lose my hand, and the head doctor said that if I didn't hold still, they'd need to take off my whole arm. He said there was already serious nerve damage and they had no other option. It was too dangerous to wait, so they amputated my hand. After the surgery, I couldn't even look at my arm. It was just a stump. Of course, it was all bandaged up, but it looked disgusting. I was crippled now. I felt so upset. Little did I know that while I was undergoing surgery, my mom was calling a lawyer to file a lawsuit to sue the bus driver. When she told me that the bus driver had been called in for questioning, I felt like my life was crumbling down around me. It wasn't his fault, but how did I tell her this? They even had witnesses, the old ladies who had seen me drop my purse. How would I tell them the truth? Meanwhile, I couldn't even go to the toilet by myself or bathe myself. It was just horrible. I was in the hospital for about 10 days and they only discharged me so I could go to the court case with the bus driver. I was so nervous as I walked in there, my stumpy arm hanging by my side. The bus driver was sitting there, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. The old ladies gave their testimony first, and I couldn't even look at them as they told the judge how I definitely dropped my purse. They seriously needed to get their eyes checked. We took a break, and as we were going back into the court, a familiar face came running towards us. It was the school janitor. He turned out to be a friend of the bus driver's, and he said he had video footage of what happened. Oh no. The judge let him play it, and I couldn't believe it. It showed everything. Me running out of school, dropping the rock on my hand, and then placing my purse at the foot of the wheel. It was all there. Who knew school CCTV cameras could catch so much? Now I had a lot of explaining to do. The bus driver looked outraged and at the same time relieved. One of the old ladies fainted, and then the judge called me up and asked me to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but truth. And so I did. I told them everything. The bus driver didn't even wait for me to finish. He stood up and told me I was a stupid little girl who'd made him lose his job and destroyed his reputation. No one believed me that my hand had fallen asleep for so long. They thought I was sick in the head, someone who liked to hurt themselves for pleasure. My mom and dad were so ashamed they took me to see a psychiatrist, and even he thought that there was something seriously wrong with me. Why did no one believe me? I now had to learn how to do everything with my left hand, and my parents wouldn't let me near anything sharp, in case I tried to hurt myself. They even removed all the rocks from our garden. They were treating me like a baby. A few weeks after everything started to calm down a bit, I felt a weird feeling in my left foot, like pins and needles, but more painful. I told my mom it was happening to my foot, and she said I really needed to stop this or she'd take me back to the psychiatrist. That night, I used my only hand to try and Google what was going on. Paresthesia, a restriction of the nerves in the body. Oh my gosh, that's what I had. I showed it to my mom, and even though she rolled her eyes, she said we could go to the doctor the next day and discuss it. The doctor ran some tests and then called me back the next day. It was bad news. He told me that I had MS, multiple sclerosis. From the look on my mom's face, it wasn't a good thing. Had I done this to myself? The doctor then explained that it's a nerve disorder and that one of the most common symptoms is tingling and numbness. I sat there in shock. My right hand, it had just been numb. And because I was so impatient and scared, I'd gone and messed everything up, and now I had no hand. No hand and MS. That was a tough pill to swallow. I knew that life wasn't going to be easy from that point, but I decided not to give up. I mean, at least I'm still alive. And guess what? I didn't really lose my amputated hand because I kept it. Yep, I asked to preserve it, and now I have an embalmed hand on the shelf of my room, sitting there like a creepy statue. And sometimes I even like to scare people with it. I don't think that the ending of my story is sad, because there's so much I'm still grateful for. Wish me luck!
John and I have been together for 4 years. Our relationship has been perfect until we used a pregnancy test and found out that John was pregnant. During the last year, John started to change. He no longer called me, and he avoided me at school as well. I had to figure out what has been going on with him. So I sent him a message saying, "Did I do something wrong?" And he replied, "Listen, I think that we should put an end to our relationship. If you really cared for me, you would have done the thing that would have made me happy." I wasn't ready to break up with John yet. He treated me well and has always been kind to me. I couldn't imagine my life without him. Without a second thought, I replied to his message, "I will do what you want me to do," and that was it. I can't say that it was the best, but it was okay, I guess. I couldn't really tell. I've never been with anyone else before John. He also managed to convince me that there was absolutely no chance for me to get pregnant on the first time. Our relationship returned back to normal after we did it. I would even say that it became even better. But a month later, my period was late and I panicked. I called John and told him that I was pregnant. I couldn't find any other logical explanation for what was happening. But he only laughed and said that I was blowing the situation out of proportion and told me that he would buy me a pregnancy test and drop by. I agreed to a suggestion only on one condition. I told him he must bring 2 tests, not 1. When John arrived, I had absolutely no idea how to use a pregnancy test. I grabbed one of the tests and handed it to John and said, "Okay, you first." He looked at me and smiled and said, "Hey, pretty face. It seems that you've got the wrong idea. You're the one that has to pee over it, not me." It sounded like complete madness to me. All I wanted to know was if there was a baby in my uterus or not. John noticed how hesitant I was, so he grabbed the pregnancy test and went to the bathroom. A few minutes later, he came out with a look of confusion all over his face. He was hiding the test behind his back. He didn't want to show me the result he got until I take my turn and use the test as well. It took me some time. When I came out of the bathroom, he looked at my test and laughed. He said, "See, you're not pregnant. Your period must have been a little late, that's all." Yes, these kinds of things happen from time to time, but why was he hiding his test? And why did he look confused when he saw it? I took the chance when he wasn't looking and stole his test. And what I discovered left me speechless. My test came negative, while his turned out to be positive. How could it be? How could John be pregnant? Didn't he just tell me that pregnancy test was meant to be used by females only? Oh my god. Did that mean my test was inaccurate? I panicked all over again. But John, trying to calm me down, told me that we could simply buy some more of those tests and try again. Oh god. But what other option did I have? John went to the pharmacy and returned with more of those test sticks, a big bottle of water, and 4 Coca-Cola cans. Because, as you probably know, we needed them so that we could go to the bathroom. We tried more than 20 test sticks. Every single one of mine came out negative, while every test stick that John used came out positive. Despite the situation being disgusting, I mean, it had to be, all that urine, ew, it was still funny. I looked at John and said, "Could it be that you are pregnant with my child?" And we both broke into laughter. John even took a selfie with the dozens of positive pregnancy tests that he had. He then posted the photo to his Instagram account with the caption that said, "It looks like I don't need a partner to be a dad. Yes, all these positive tests are mine." We spent the whole night reading comments and laughing, and most importantly, I finally got my period that night. On the next day at school, everyone gathered around us and asked, "Is it true that all those positive pregnancy tests were John's, or is it just a silly joke?" But John answered with pride, "Yes, they are all mine." Knowing that everyone in school knew that John and I had sex still made me feel uncomfortable. It should have been a private experience that no one else but me and John should have known about. A few days after we had posted the photo, the cheerleading team leader approached me and informed me that the team had decided to cut me off, as they believed that it was not right to keep me in the team while I was pregnant. They believed that my belly would eventually get bigger and I would look ridiculous dancing with my big belly and short skirt all at once. They would definitely be ashamed of me for that. I tried once and again to convince her that I wasn't pregnant, but she insisted that no one believed John's lie, and that was it. As you can probably see, my life took a turn for the worse. While John was enjoying his unrivaled popularity due to his wittiness, I was witnessing my life falling apart, one piece after another. More than 2 months passed by while I refused to speak to John. Even though I was the one who encouraged him to post the photo in the first place, I still blamed him for all that happened. At first, John did not care that much about speaking to me again. He even got himself a new girlfriend. However, during the last week, he started calling and texting me once again on a daily basis, but I never returned any of his calls or messages. I felt extremely mad at him. During gym class, John approached the gym teacher and told him that he will not be able to continue the class as he was feeling pain in his lower abdomen, but the teacher only looked at him in ridicule and said, "First, your pregnancy test comes back positive, and now you're having your period. What is next? Will you grow a pair of breasts next?" Poor John felt extremely embarrassed, and everyone distanced themselves from John. No one wanted to be friends with the guy who was slowly turning into a girl, but for me, I felt very sorry for him. I went to him and said, "Listen, you don't have to attract everyone's attention to be seen as an interesting person. You once were perfect in everyone's eyes. I wish you would stop acting weird and that you would return back to your old self." He started to cry out loud and said, "No one wants to believe me, even you." At that moment, the mean cheerleading team leader approached us and said, "Hey, look at that. It seems that our hormones are confused. Please be kind to Mrs. John." That loser. She really stepped on my last nerve with her uncalled for comment. I jumped on her and started pulling her hair, but the coach held me and pulled us apart. He ordered us to go to the principal's office. On our way to the principal's office, I looked at my palm and saw a strand of her hair still stuck between my fingers, while John held tightly onto my other hand. I didn't want to leave his hand. I really felt like there was something going on with him. While we waited to be called into the principal's office, John looked at me and apologized for what had happened to me because of him. He was very upset because he made me choose between ending our relationship or having sex with him. He even told me that he was thankful for me because I stood up for him and it meant a lot to him. For a second, I thought that he was going to tell me that he was willing to give our relationship a second chance. And honestly, I was willing to do so in a heartbeat as well. But his new girlfriend walked in and ruined everything. Once she saw him, she jumped on him and they both shared a long, warm kiss. He didn't seem to mind one bit. Once again, I couldn't stay calm. It was too much for me to bear. I pushed her away from him and kicked him in the nuts. He screamed his lungs out and fell unconscious. A few seconds went by, and he was being carried to the ambulance that took him to the hospital. I was in knee-deep problems. I thought that final incident would definitely get me grounded for life. Over the course of the next few days, John was no longer to be seen around school, and I didn't hear anything about him. I know that I might look stupid to you, but I was worried about him anyways. I felt that I had caused him some serious problem when I kicked him, but I honestly never thought that my kick was that strong. I had to check on him, but how would I do so? His phone was off all the time. There was no other way. I had to go to his new girlfriend and ask her about him. When I asked her about John, she told me, "That fool broke up with me, and I don't care what happens to him. He can go to hell." My back was to the wall. I had no other way to check on John than to go visit him at his home, and that was what I did. When I visited him, he looked even worse than ever. However, he was thrilled to see me and told me that kicking him in the balls was the best thing that has ever happened to him, and that if I hadn't kicked him in the balls, he would have been doomed for sure. Despite that, he told me that he was totally desperate. He had lost his testicles for good. Everything finally started to make sense. John's pregnancy tests were indeed positive, but that wasn't because the tests were bad. It was because John was suffering from testicular cancer. The pains he had been suffering from weren't made up by him so that he could get more attention from people around him. They were very real. Testicular cancer? That must be the worst thing that could ever happen to any guy. What started as a joke ended as a disaster. Not only that, but also the only way of treatment for his case was the complete amputation of his testicles. I promised myself that day that I will never let John face all that on his own. Despite the fact that he had left me all alone before, this was totally different. I was with him when he went to surgery to get his testicles removed. All of that worked in our favor. With his testicles removed, there was no way at all that he would get me pregnant. He feels that our relationship has become perfect and stress-free.